Welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In today's video, we are going to include another 20 creature cards with a mana value of 5 right into our Momir Vig Cube. What's up, MTG That is the MTG Burgeoning community. Here we are with another installment of our ongoing Momir Vig series. If you are unfamiliar with the goals of this series or just need a refresher, look in the description below. There is a link there to our introduction to Momir Vig. Additionally, in the description below, there is a link to Cube Cobra where you can see the entire contents of the cube as it stands right now. So let's get right to our next 20 creatures. Leading off, we have a mono blue edition in Cyclone Sawyer, a 3/4 elemental with the coveted flying. In a format driven by combat, any creatures with evasion are extremely valuable. When Cyclone Sawyer dies, we may put 3+1/+1 counters on target land we control, and if we do, that land becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste that's still a land. So here we have a creature that even if it ends up dying, and it's a 3/4 flyer for only 5, so those are pretty good stats. If it dies, it leaves a creature behind in a format that's all about creatures and attacking. Cyclone Sawyer is leading off in a very, very strong 5 spot. Next up, our first colorless edition, we have the Darksteel Juggernaut. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of artifacts we control. Minimally, it's going to be a 1/1. However, there are quite a number of artifacts in the Momir Vig Cube, so although it is unlikely that it'll just be a 1/1, that's all going to depend on how lucky you are in summoning other artifact creatures. Darksteel Juggernaut is indestructible and it attacks each turn if able. So if you are fortunate enough to get that power and toughness up to just be a little more menacing than a 1/1, Darksteel Juggernaut could lead you to victory. Creature number 3, we have a multicolored creature in Deathbringer Liege, a 3/4 horror. Other white creatures we control get +1/+1. Other black creatures we control get +1/+1. Whenever we play a white spell, we may tap target creature. Whenever we play a black spell, we may destroy target creature if it's tapped. Now, let's talk about this Liege here for a moment. The +1/+1 buffing for white and black creatures is phenomenal. However, you can't guarantee that you're going to have any white or black creatures on your side of the battlefield. Every creature that's summoned through the Momir Vig Cube is done so randomly. So you could go an entire game with Deathbringer Liege on your side of the battlefield, yet never have another white or black creature. And its abilities, if we are fortunate enough to summon a white spell, we're going to tap down a creature. If we're fortunate enough to summon a black spell, we're going to destroy any target creature as long as it's tapped. So Deathbringer Liege, if all the stars align, could be the all-star in a game of Momir Vig. Speaking of all-stars in this format, any creatures that can create other creatures are the creme de la creme, and our 4th edition is no exception to that rule. We have Deep Forest Hermit, a 1/1 elf druid with Vanishing 3. This creature ETBs with 3 time counters on it. At the beginning of our upkeep, we remove a time counter from it, and when the last one is removed, we sacrifice Deep Forest Hermit. When it ETBs, we create 4 1/1 green Squirtle creature tokens, and Squirtles we control get +1/+1. So for as long as we have the vanishing counters on Deep Forest Hermit, for the investment of 5 mana through our Momir Vig Avatar, we are going to create 9 total power and toughness stretched across 5 bodies. That should be enough to overwhelm the battlefield and lead to imminent victory. Creature number 5, our first mono-red creature of this installment, is Demanding Dragon, a 5/5 flyer for 5 mana. When it ETBs, it deals 5 damage to target opponent unless that player sacrifices a creature. Now, we only begin with 24 life in Momir Vig, so it probably is safe to assume that if somebody summons a token copy of Demanding Dragon to their side of the battlefield, you can most likely expect one of our opponents to sacrifice one of their lower-costed creatures. Creature number 6, our first mono black edition, we have Dire Fleetravager, a 4/4 orc pirate wizard. It has menace, it has death touch, and when it ETBs, each player loses a third of their life, rounded up. The menace is a great form of evasion, particularly if our opponents are running low on creatures. The ETB trigger does not always help us out. It does not always do a favorable job of getting us ahead. However, it's just one of those points in the Momir Vig Cube. Not every creature is going to be overly helpful. Staying with mono black, we have Dramaka, Kalastria Blood Chief, a 4/4 vampire shaman with flying, so we've got that precious evasion. However, even more valuable than the evasion could be the removal that Dramaka possesses. Pay X and 2 black, and target creature gets -0/-X until end of turn, and Dramaka gets +X/+O until end of turn. However, that ability can only be activated as long as you have at least 2 black mana sources. So MTG this is another way in which to say, make sure your basic land libraries are diversified. Make sure you got all the colors in there, because from a Momir Vig standpoint, there may not be many creatures more powerful than Dramaka. It has evasion, it can pump, and it can remove creatures as long as you have that double black mana. Next up in our first multicolored edition in this video, we have Dramaka the Eternal, a 5/5 flyer. And whenever our dragon we control attacks, we get to bolster 2, which means we pick a creature with the least toughness among creatures we control and put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Getting a 5/5 flyer for the investment of 5, it should be very, very likely that we can send Dramaka the Eternal into combat against one of our opponents without the fear of it being blocked down or without the fear of it dying, and then we're going to bolster our smaller creatures, creating even more offensive threats or a greater defense. All right, creature number 9 in another mono red edition, we have Dwarven Strike Force, a 4/3 dwarf that says we can discard a card at random from our hand, and Dwarven Strike Force gains first strike and haste until end of turn. Seeing that each time that we summon a creature from the Momir Vig Cube, we must discard a land card from our hand, using Dwarven Strike Force's ability may cause a player to think twice about whether or not it's valuable enough to do so. However, the haste and the first strike, that may be worth it. And hitting the halfway point, we're going back to mono black, and we have Hendrix, Master Breeder. It's a 2/2 human wizard. Whenever we cast a creature spell, we create X 1/1 black thrall creature tokens, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. And whenever we control 7 or more thralls, we can sacrifice Hendrix, Master Breeder. So we're summoning the creatures from our cube, and the mana that we're using to cast them is going to count for their converted mana cost. So Hendrix is going to end up being a creature that we invested 5 mana in. That's just a 2/2, but it will leave at least 7 thralls behind. That could be enough to swarm our opponents and hopefully push us to the brink of victory. All right, number 11, and we have our first mono white edition. It is Elite Scaleguard, a 2/3 human soldier, and then when it ETBs, we bolster 2. So again, another bolster 2, similar to Dramaka the Eternal. And whenever a creature we control with a +1/+1 counter on it attacks, we can tap a target creature defending player controls. There is a pretty popular +1/+1 theme woven into this Momir Vig deck. And if you are fortunate enough through the randomization of the creature summonings from the cube, you may be able to have very, very powerful +1/+1 synergies leading you to victory. Creature number 12, we're back to mono red, and we have Ember Ma Hellion, a 4/5 trampler. If another red source we control will deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage +1 to that permanent or player instead. So what we're looking at here are 2 key points when we're talking about Ember Ma Hellion. First, we need additional red sources to deal damage. So hopefully through the randomization of your creature summoning in the Momir Vig Cube, Cube, you're fortunate enough to get some more red creatures out there so that we can tack on an additional point of damage. Also keep in mind that it says if a red source we control would deal damage, it does not necessarily state combat damage. So if you have any red sources that can deal some direct damage to your opponents, it's going to deal so one more additional point in the presence of Ember Ma Hellion. All right, next up, a mono blue edition. We have Empress Galleon, 1/3 legend that has tap 2 blue, tap Empress Galleon, gain control of target legend or legendary permanent. So for the purposes of this Momir Vig variant, Empress Galleon's text should read tap or pay 2 blue, tap, gain control of target legendary creature. So MTGBC, make sure your basic land library has plenty of blue so that you can activate Empress Galleon and take from our opponent's control any of their legendary creatures. Next creature up is a colorless edition, and it is Etched Monstrosity. It enters the battlefield with 5 -1/-1 counters on it, making it a 5/5 for 5 mana. However, if you are fortunate enough through the diversification of your library and your basic lands, if you can pay Wooburg, you will remove 5 counters from Etched Monstrosity, making it a 10/10, and then you will also have target player, which is most likely you, drawing 3 cards. Another highlight, make sure your library has as many different colors as you can possibly cram with all those basic lands. All right, reaching the 3/4 mark, we have another mono blue edition. We have Eternal Skylord. It's a 3/3 zombie wizard, and when it ETBs, we amass 2. To amass 2, we put 2 +1/+1 counters on an army we control, and if we don't control an army, first we create a 0/0 black zombie army creature token first, and then zombie tokens we control have flying. So Eternal Skylord is a 1 for 2. We're summoning 1, but we're getting 2, and one of them is going to have evasion. So in a format that's driven by creatures, having creatures that create more creatures, even if they have evasion, which makes them even better, is highly, highly advantageous. Next up, another mono blue edition. It's creature number 16. It is Ether Swarm Adjudicator, a 4/4 Vidalcan Knight with flying. Yay for the evasion. However, let's take a look at what its activated abilities entail. Pay 1, a white and a black, tap it. Destroy target creature or enchantment. This is Momir Vig, so this is more likely just going to be destroy target creature. Pay 2 and a blue, untap Ether Sworn Adjudicator. So if you have enough of Esper colors on your side of the battlefield, you should not have a problem wiping out the entirety of our opponent's armies by activating Ether Swarm Adjudicator's tap to destroy creature and untap abilities. It'll be only a matter of time until your 4/4 flying is just right overhead, or just making sure that you control the entire board, including all of your opponents. All right, just a handful of creatures left, but another mono blue edition. This time it is Fairy Formation, a 5/4 flyer for 5 mana. Boy, we are really churning out some value in the 5 slot, aren't we, MTGBC? However, this one may be even more beneficial. We can pay 3 and a blue and create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying, and we draw a card. Again, make sure you have those islands in your basic land deck. Here we have a big beefy flyer that can create smaller flyers and put a card in our hand. Remember, each time we summon a creature from the Momir Vig Cube, we must discard a card from our hand. So having cards in our hand, having lands on the battlefield, and any way in which to get ahead of curve with either or both is going to out-resource our opponents and most likely lead to our imminent victory at the Momir Vig table. Creature number 18, a mono red edition. It is Falcon Rathmer Waters, a 2/2 vampire warrior with flying and haste, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Can you imagine summoning Falcon Rathmer Waters to your side of the battlefield, looking across the table at an opponent that has no flyers or reach, sending it into combat right away, and then in your next turn, it's already a 4/4 flying with haste, hoping to repeat that same process. creature number 19, and one of my personal favorites, going way old school with this one, MTGBC. We have Fallen Angel, a 3/3 angel with that highly coveted evasive ability of flying. We can sacrifice a creature, and we can give Fallen Angel +2/+1 until end of turn. If the game goes a little longer and it's down to you and one opponent that has no creatures with flying or no creatures with reach, you can go all out and commit your entire army to the sacrificial lambs to Fallen Angel and send in evasive game-winning combat damage. And here we have it, MTGBC, creature number 20. It's another mono red edition. This time it is Flame Rush Rider, a 3/3 human warrior. Whenever it attacks, we create a token. We put onto the battlefield a token tapped and attacking that's a copy of another target attacking creature, and we exile the token at the end of combat. Now, we cannot use the creature's dash mechanic because this creature is not in our hand, and it never will be in Momir Vig. So for the purposes of Flame Rush Rider, if we have a beater on the battlefield, and hopefully it's not legendary, but we know that our opponents can't handle it, sending Flame Rush Rider into combat and creating a token of that beater or of that evasive creature that our opponents cannot deal with or handle, well, that should send their life total south more quickly than not having Flame Rush Rider. So we can consider Flame Rush Rider a potential game-winning creature, summoned from the 5 spot. And there we have it, MTGBC, another 20 cards into the Momir Vig Cube. Let me know your thoughts about these editions in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.